Thanks for having me, Melanie. It's really an honor to be a part of this amazing organization and this amazing event. 14 years, I can't even get over it. So today I'm going to talk about dealing with difficult people. And if I sound a little hoarse, I'm not sure. I think it's allergies. And I hope it'll clear up the more I talk. But I hope everybody can hear me or see me be interpreted. Thank you. So we're going to talk about dealing with difficult people, and I would bet that some of you have dealt with difficult people at some point. I really appreciate this quote because if you don't have that end result in mind, it's very hard to know what direction you're headed or what direction you should head in. So figuring out what you want from interchanges with other people is an important first step to dealing with folks that may come across as more difficult. So today we're going to talk about what we can't change, what we can, and also what we can change. We'll talk a little bit about the different styles of behavior that people have so we can kind of understand that not everybody's like us. If you're not familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we'll kind of go through that very, very quickly. And then we're going to talk about how to avoid button pushing, empathy for other people, how we can prevent and handle problems, prevent them before they happen, then handle them after they've happened, a little bit of de-stress techniques, and then some general coping stuff, plus a 5-step process when you're working with people that may or may not be difficult. So we've all dealt with difficult people, and you see those people who just won't listen to reason, won't listen to anything. They've already made up their mind, people who blame others, people that are constantly negative, those know-it-alls, those people that seem to have an answer for everything, even though it may not be accurate, those people who just flat out lie and deceive. And then you've got the ones that are just angry. So I'd really love it if you would share in the chat, which is the worst to you? Which type of person do you have the most problem with? And I'll give you a couple of minutes to write that down. And if there's a different type of difficult person that I haven't listed, please feel free to include those too. I'm sure this isn't the whole list of people who are difficult. Marion, thank you for your answer. Angry for sure, she says, and narcissistic people who blame others are another one of her pet peeves of difficult people. Ooh, Melanie, the friendly ones, they seem to be friendly, but they're really destructive behind your back. Deborah says angry and liars. Yenter, two faces, yeah. Definitely my least favorite are the ones that I can't read. If somebody's just being angry, at least I know where I stand. But those folks that look okay on the surface and then there's something else going on behind. Okay, thank you for your answers. It helps me so much when I used to do, or have done, presentations for a very long time, but they were all in person and I could get facial reactions and immediate reactions from people. So thank you for sharing in the chat. So I don't know if you're familiar with this quote, but this idea that if you change the way you look at things, then things are different. And we really have control over how we look at things, much more so than being able to change the things that are in front of us. So here's what we can't change. We can influence people, and we'll talk about trying to influence people, but we can't really change them. I think a lot of us enter into marriages thinking that we're going to be able to change that spouse, and it turns out, nah, we can only push in a certain direction to try and get things to work out, but we really can't change their basic nature. Remember that something that drives me crazy may not drive you crazy. It may not drive, what drives you crazy may not drive somebody else crazy. So be aware of that we've all got areas that are a little bit different in the way we perceive how people treat us. And 80% of our problems come from 20% of the people. And so remembering that, and that we can't change those folks, and that we've got to be aware of that 20% and remember that it's not the majority. So we can change. These are the things we can change. We can take charge of ourselves and watch how we talk about ourselves to ourselves. I have a terrible habit of giving myself a hard time. I've just had 2 days off from work and I can't go anywhere because I'm quarantined. And so I have a tendency to give myself a really hard time for not getting anything really productive done, because sitting in front of TV and binge watching Netflix, probably not the most productive activity that I could do. But I find that I have to watch how I talk to myself, so I give myself a break. I work at the Small Business Development Center with a lot of business owners, small business owners, and a lot of my clients are having a really hard time staying focused right now, doing what they need to do to progress in their business. And I have to keep reminding them, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of an election. Things are a little bit weird right now. So give yourself a break and watch how you talk to yourself. Being in control of how you come across and understanding that that's one thing that you can change. A sense of humor is going to get you through so much, and I'm sure most of you are aware of that. But trying to work on your sense of humor so that you can find the humor even in situations like what we're in right now. Make sure you've got a group of people that you can go to, and we'll talk a little bit about those behavioral styles in a minute, but make sure that you've got people who will kind of push you when you need to be pushed, or just listen when all you want to do is complain right now and you don't want somebody to kind of push you to action. You just want to be able to complain. And then the one thing that I find that helps me the most when I'm dealing with somebody who's difficult, somebody I disagree with, I try to find something that we have in common or something that helps me find a soft spot for that person. Understanding that we all come from different backgrounds, that things might not be exactly as we perceive them in that other person's life. My mother always said to me that I shouldn't judge anybody until I've walked a mile in their moccasins. My mother was not Native American, so I'm not quite sure why she chose moccasins. But from what I understand, it's because when you walk in moccasins, you can feel every single rock that you pass over, that you walk on. So those are the things we can change. This is probably one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite comedians, Lily Tomlin. I always wondered why somebody didn't do something about that. Then I realized I was that somebody. We really have an awful lot of ability to change the things around us if we just find a way to change how we perceive those. So, Marion, Good Place is always a good one to binge watch. Sorry, I didn't see that earlier. If anybody's familiar with DISC, the behavioral style process, this is, and there are plenty of quizzes online that you can take that you don't even have to pay for, that'll give you kind of an idea about this. But we tend to fall into one of these four categories. Most people have two that are above the midline when they're tested. I don't. I've only got one, and I'll let you guess what that is. But people tend to either be D, I, S, or C. The D folks, the people who are primarily D, who test out as D, are those people who are very driven. They're the ones that get contracts signed and they get the sale made, and they tend to be leaders, and they're super focused on results, and they're focused on task stuff, and they tend to be very outgoing. The I's are outgoing, but they're more focused on people things. They're enthusiastic, they've got a lot of energy, they like to collaborate, and they love social recognition, and they've got a lot of friends. The S's are very steady. They're the folks that are good listeners. Those are the ones that you want to have somebody in your camp who can just listen. They like stability. They like to collaborate also because they're, again, people focused, and they give a lot of support, and they're more reserved. The conscientious, the C, are the people who are very reserved. They're more analytical. They're going to look at tasks. They're going to look at facts. And they like accuracy. They really don't like it when somebody calls them out for being incorrect on something, because they don't usually make mistakes, because they are very careful in what they do. I always use this example. These, if they're buying, those Ds are going to be in the car dealership and asking, so how much is this? Just give me the bottom line. I don't have time for any negotiation. Just tell me how much. The S's are all going to be about the relationship between them and the salesperson. And if you're hearing dings, I'm so sorry. I realize that one of my apps is still open. Let me see if I can't just cut that. Hopefully I won't have any more of those. And so you've got the S's are going to be about that relationship with the salesperson. They really care about how they're treated. If the salesperson is rude to them, they're probably going to be right out of that dealership to go to buy the car somewhere else, or they're going to go somewhere else. The C's have been on Carfax, CarMax, Consumer Reports. They are so knowledgeable about that car before they even hit the lot. So they really know how much they should be paying, and they probably have decided on the color and everything else before they can even decide, even before they go to the dealership. And the I's are all about, how cute do I look in this car? Now, I have a Fiat 500. I don't drive it as much lately, but I have a Fiat 500, and I'm adorable in that car. So you can guess what I am. So Natalia says she's a CD on the disc. Yeah, I find, Natalia, maybe you can share how that works for you at your church, because I've found that this is one of the most important things I have ever done in working with a team, is to know where my team stands, to understand what their behavioral style is. I have some D friends that are very hard for me to deal with unless I raise up that part of my behavior, to make myself a little strong. Otherwise, I'll get rolled over on. But if I don't have a friend when I'm having problems and I can't get past a point, if I've got a D friend, they're going to push me out of my lethargy. They're going to make sure, if you break up with a boyfriend or go through a really bad time, your S friends are going to listen, and your D friends are going to go, okay, fine, time to get over it. Let's go on. So this is one of my favorite quotes as well. Speak when you're angry, and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret. If you can stop that anger before you show it, remember your parents used to tell you to count to 10 when you were angry? It's still really good advice. So as promised, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And there are some researchers who probably don't completely agree with this. But I still find it really helpful in framing why people act the way they do sometimes. If physiological needs, if the really basic stuff hasn't been handled, if you have to worry about where you're going to sleep or where you're going to get your next meal, it is really hard for you to get beyond that one need, that one situation. And I think we see this every time we have a disaster, that people get very focused on making sure that those physiological needs are taken care of. If they can get past, they know that that's in pretty good shape. Then they go to the safety needs. They try very hard to make sure that their personal security is taken care of, that they've got employment, that they've got their health. And then if they can get past the safety needs, then they really focus on love and belonging, being part of a group, having a family, having that sense of connection. And it's only after that point that they get to work on things like self-esteem. And then beyond that, self-actualization, to be able to really follow their dreams and do what they want to do with their lives. I see this very often. I've done some classroom situations where I've been in 8th grade classes and trying to convince kids to take the higher level courses when they get to high school. And I usually ask the students to close their eyes and imagine what their life is going to be like 10 years from then, from that point at 8th grade. And I've noticed that there will always be some guys in the back of the room that won't close their eyes. And for a while, it really concerned me. I mean, why won't they do that? Why don't they trust me? And I realized those safety needs have not been met. They're concerned about what will happen if they close their eyes. So how can I possibly get those students to think about their esteem, to think about self-actualization? So when you realize that you're dealing with somebody who's difficult, if you can kind of figure out where they might be on that hierarchy and possibly reassure them that the physiological needs are okay, that they're safe, and then make those connections, because then and only then can we get past that. I hope that makes sense. Eleanor Roosevelt has a wonderful quote, and I find that this is so true, that we're the ones that can determine how people treat us. A good friend of mine has done customer service training, and he and I both were trying to get people in for customer service training, and discovered that everybody thinks that customer service is terrible across the board, right? I mean, we've all been in situations where we felt like the service was horrible, but we couldn't get anybody to come to the class because very few people think that they're responsible for the bad customer service. So this friend of mine started twisting what he was offering in the way of a workshop and said, want better customers? People came because they'd like to have better customers. And then what he taught them was this quote in particular, that you can create the situation that you want by helping people understand how to treat you and by treating them well. So let me ask this, what are your buttons? What really pushes you? Because we really can't avoid other people's buttons, right? Because we don't know what they are until we've talked to them, and then suddenly we realize, oh, I must have done something to set them off. But what are yours? What really gets you? What makes you immediately respond in a way that you don't mean to respond? Somebody says something, somebody reacts a certain way, and suddenly you're off to the races. It's hard to rein yourself back in. I like that. Yeah, Deborah says dishonesty. Marion says when people can't understand that something they're doing is making another person uncomfortable, or they recognize that they are and don't care enough to change their behavior. Yeah, those would push my buttons too. My big one is when somebody tells me, well, I know that you think, and then says something about how I think, or I know that you felt a certain way, and for some reason, that one thing will upset me more than anything in my life. because they don't know how I feel. They don't know what I'm thinking. And I would like to be the one that's in control of that. My son, who's a wonderful, wonderful guy, I've raised an amazing human being. But some years ago, I used to say he was the one person that could push my buttons. Always something would happen and I would feel be pushed. So that used to be crazy. And then suddenly I realized nobody pushes my buttons except me, because I do control. And if somebody says something, I have anything I want to do to relate to it. How I respond is completely my decision. I just have to remember that I have that control, and I have to step back from it and realize that maybe when somebody says, well, you've been thinking this, that they're not really hostile. They're not trying to second guess me. I can just understand that that's one of those phrases that tends to set me off. Certainly, certain people are going to set us off a little more than others, but if we can grab that and understand what our buttons are, then when it happens, we can back up from it and realize, oh, this is one of those situations where I need to be careful. Does that make sense? When people won't do something because it doesn't directly personally, that's a good one, Mel. And then when things don't go your way, Caitlin, yeah, those are all really good examples. So all of you can be aware of those. If you know what those buttons are, you see them coming, you see them, you can sometimes see all of that, see them a mile off. Understand that that's the one thing that you can do to result in better situations, is to back off from that, give yourself a count and go, there's one of my buttons and it's coming my way. I have to do something to make sure that doesn't happen. And then empathy. I truly believe that if we could teach empathy in school, if we could teach adults who are already out of school empathy, and I do understand that there are people out there that probably will never get this, will never understand this, but just like my mother and her moccasin suggestion, being able to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, being able to understand that somehow people grow up in different situations that may not have been your situation. We hear a lot about these days about privilege, male privilege, able people, non-disabled people privilege. I mean, being able to kind of figure out what that's like for someone, what they're going through, what their history may be with a situation or with society. I just think this is the key to peace across the world. If we could just find some way to get across to people that being able to step back and kind of think about, well, what is that other person going through? Now, I'm not psychic, and so I can't possibly know that. But if I can open up a discussion without being too inquisitive about somebody's life, but just enough of a discussion to get to know somebody. And maybe all it is, maybe all I can do is figure out their behavioral style by talking to them for a little while, or walking into an office where they have their office. You can tell the D's and C's because for the most part, and this is not true across the board, they're not decorated. The offices are pretty sparse because they're all about getting the work done, right? Those I's and S's, we love the people that we work with, and that doesn't mean the D's and C's don't, but it's just not as, and it's a very different kind of situation. And I know a lot of D's and C's that I don't come to work to be friends. That's their attitude. You won't usually find an I or an S that will tell you that, but that certainly isn't across the board with everybody. But if you can understand somebody's behavioral style, then maybe you can be a little more empathetic in understanding that that person doesn't see the world the way I do. They're not looking for the same things. We found in our office that relying on DISC when we approach each other is incredibly important and helps get ourselves positioned to communicate better, to get better results. I've learned for some time now, I've had a high D, high C boss. I've had 2 in a row now. And they both have a tendency to want to get to the bottom line pretty quickly, but they also wanted enough information to make a decision. If I put myself in their shoes, then I know how to approach them. I know what to tell them. I know how much data to give them, but not overload them with so much that they can't get to that decision. If you're dealing with a high C, and by the way, high Cs, that's who you want as your accountant. You want somebody who's going to have that attention to detail and take it slow, be a little more reserved. You know, but those C's are really going to be irritated if you come to them with less than ample information for them to make a decision or to figure out a problem. On the flip side, the S's and the I's would really like you to sit and talk to them a little bit before you get to the meat of what you're asking. A little bit of socialization. So that when you're dealing with people on your team or you're dealing with clients, usually you can, if you get into understanding DISC, you can get a pretty good feeling of their personality, their behavioral style before you even start interacting with them too much. A little bit of conversation. Anybody got any other suggestions on how you can consider each person individually? I'll give you a minute or two to write up, but I also want to tell you a story. My best friend is an artist and she does a lot of shows, one in particular, the Fort Worth Main Street Art Festival. And I would go up to Fort Worth with her when she did that show, and we would set up on a Wednesday evening and we would be there until Sunday night and then close down, pack up the truck, and then drive back to San Antonio. We finally got to the point where we were too old to do that, so we'd spend another night in Fort Worth and then come back the next morning. So relieved. She was just on and sweet and kind to every person who came into that booth on Thursday and Friday and most of Saturday. But by Saturday evening, my job was to answer people's questions when they weren't really interested in buying her artwork. But questions like, so where is Dripping Springs? So how do you do this? You know, what kind of process do you use? And one of the reasons that she started losing her patience was because it felt like she had answered that question 100 times already. So how could this person ask it again? Well, they weren't asking again. It was a different person. And trying to make sure that she treated everybody with the same respect that she did that first one on Thursday morning was very difficult. And plus we were exhausted and tired. So my job was to just kind of intercede and take care of those folks because I hadn't heard the question quite as frequently. So, oh, wonderful one. Guadalupe, thank you for that. Understanding your implicit biases. Oh, that's a rough one. Realizing that you grow up with biases toward and against certain people, certain groups, certain behavioral styles, anything that separates out, understanding how, just like the button pushing, understanding how people affect you because of the way you grew up or the lessons you learned as you were growing up or your parents' attitudes or where you went to school or whatever else. That's a really good one, to understand those biases and then work past them or around them. Taking the time to get to know people. Melanie, I love that one. It really is. If you can spend some time getting to know someone, certainly if it's a quick customer service interaction, you don't get those opportunities. but anytime you can, really, really helpful. So here's one way, or a few ways to prevent problems. Be prepared. Oh, please, 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 don't just agree with people. Don't just say, yeah, that's true, unless you really mean it, because you can back yourself into a corner that way. If somebody comes up to you with a problem, if you can rephrase what they've said, don't just repeat what they've said, but switch the words around so that you can get across to that person that you honestly know and understand what they're telling you, you're going to be in shape. And then these three phrases, I hear, I understand, I think you're saying, those are really good ways to start that rephrase. Those are catchphrases that help people understand that you're there to help. And when somebody's got a problem, they want some help. They really want the problem taken care of, right? Now, granted, there are some people that are just in a really bad mood. So usually those will come at you and you won't even be aware, and then you've got to shut down the problem, you know, handle it. So when those situations happen, think about how you can assess the situation, figure out what's going on. And again, at this point, you probably can get a good feel for that behavioral style. You can analyze whether your buttons are being pushed, you know, if your biases are entering into it. I think that being able to kind of figure out what's going on in that situation, with that problem, you'll be in better shape. And then if it's difficult behavior, just meeting it head on. Don't try to duck it. Just try to come to it and assess that and talk to people about that, again, using those phrases. Stay calm and objective. That's hard sometimes, especially the calmness, but again, that counting, giving yourself a minute or two to breathe, to make sure that you don't react, but act. And then being truthful can help you so much, being upfront about a situation. If something bad has happened and you try to pretend that it didn't happen or pretend that it wasn't that bad, then you're going to have more problems, because the person that you're dealing with is really not going to trust you from that point on. Try to make it a two-way conversation. Now, this can be a problem from both ends. You're dealing with somebody who's really angry, and they won't let you get a word in edgewise. So if you can just relax a little bit. I've found in a lot of situations, people just want to be heard. Some years ago, I was working for a bank in the lending department, and I had a whole bunch of very angry customers because we had to collect money from those customers that should have been collected over a period of years. Escrow accounts on loans, if you're familiar with that. And everybody had a right to be angry, but I also had a right to tell them that we needed to collect that money, and we could work out negotiation on how to do that. But being able to get past the anger so that we could have that two-way conversation was incredibly difficult. But I finally found that the best thing I could do was just let them go. Let them yell for a little while. Understand, it wasn't me. I was there to help, but I wanted them to have a chance to talk. And at one point, when they finally would calm down a bit, I would say, okay, I'm happy to have listened. Thank you for sharing all that. Now, can we start to work on this? Because I don't want to cut you off. You've been through a lot, and if I can let you have that conversation, then we can go on from there. And it was interesting how different people reacted to me when I let them do that, because they really just wanted to be heard. Try to put yourself in the other person's place. Again, this goes back to that whole, walking in their shoes, understanding how you would feel if that had happened to you. And then being flexible, tolerant, and then try not to light the fire, right? You're dealing with kindling, and you really don't want to strike that match and make it more heated. So are there other ways that you guys have figured out that works for you when you're dealing with a problem? Something I haven't mentioned? Because I'm always looking for ideas. I'll give you a minute. It gives me a chance to drink some water. Marion mentioned that I hear you saying XYZ gives them a chance to correct any misconceptions, and you're not being accusatory. Very good point, Marion. It really does help. I don't see anything popping up in the chat box, but I'll keep an eye on it. So, okay, you've already had a really hard day, or you're getting ready for an onslaught of complaints, or whatever's going on in your life. And I'm sure that you know most of these de-stress techniques. For me, breathing has always been the magic pill for me. I learned breathing techniques when I was pregnant with my son, and I took Lamaze training. But I've used those same techniques over and over again anytime I get tense. And it really comes from not breathing from here, but breathing from your abdomen, making sure that you get that breath in. I always visualize that I'm pulling air in through my belly button. That's how low I want that breath to be. I want it, because the first thing that happens when we get nervous or upset is that our diaphragm constricts and it cuts off some of that oxygen supply. So if you can pull it into your abdomen, feel that air coming in, it will nearly always relax you a little bit better. Visualization for me has been a big help, as that one quote at the beginning about seeing the end result, knowing what you want to have happen before you enter a situation. If I can visualize a positive outcome to a situation, if I know the situation's coming at me, just any kind of way to calm myself down and know, here's what I want the end result to be. And can I picture that in my mind? Because if I can do that, nearly always things turn out right. Music's a good relaxer for me, and everybody's got different taste. I have to go to light jazz, down-tempo hip hop, you know, something along those lines, or classical if I'm feeling really stressed. But then there are certain times when that's not the music I need, so I'll switch it up. Massage, haven't had one in a very long time because I can't get out, but I'm really looking forward to that one soon. I notice that my shoulders, as soon as I get tense, they start rising up. So if I can at least pull them down, but boy, I could use a good massage. Meditation and prayer, both, whatever works best for you, certainly helpful. And then acupressure, I tend to just do some acupressure on my shoulders or my hand, anything that I can do. But this last one is magic. It's even more magic than the breathing. If you can find something to laugh about, not the person you're dealing with, don't be laughing at them. That won't get you anywhere. But if you can find something to laugh about, and we talked about binge watching, if you can find comedies in this day and age, something that will get those juices going and get you laughing out loud, it can be the biggest stress reliever you could possibly have. What else do you guys do? Slow, deep breathing in an equal interval. Go to your bedroom when you're upset to calm down. Listen to music on the iPhone. Take walks are good. I tend to walk on the river walk, and that's been a saving grace for me to be able to get out of the house and go somewhere. I'm close to the Mission Reach area of San Antonio, and being able to go out there where it's not quite as crowded has been a lifesaver. Stinson Trail, if you like walking and you'd like to have some shade, that area close to the Stinson Airport is just, it's magical. It's like a forest in the middle of San Antonio. Video games, Jonathan, all right. That would not be the thing that would help me, but I can see where that would be helpful. And as Marion points out, the video games can help you get that laughter going. Great suggestions. But I think I'm with Catherine. I think I would like to just go to my bedroom and calm down. So here are some thoughts that you can hang on to that'll help you kind of get through those times. If you can just stay calm, I'm in control if I can stay calm. Getting upset isn't going to solve the problem. I'm not going to let that person get to me. I know I can't change anybody else. I can only change me. I can let people know how I feel without being hostile about it. If you can develop this one, you're a better person than I am. No one is right, no one is wrong. We just have different needs. I'm having a harder time with that one these days. I can't judge anyone else. I judge myself way too much. I'd like to stop doing that too. My self-image is not affected by other people's opinion of me. Probably one of the hardest for a lot of us. You grow up really being affected by your friends, and then it's family and it's coworkers. How do you get past that? But trust me, you shouldn't allow it to affect you, but that's a really hard one. This last one on this page, and I got another whole slide of these, but this one on this page, the person who stays calm wins. I've had a number of friends who have gone through very, very many divorces and have had to deal with custody issues. And unless the child's in danger, the person who doesn't make that kid choose is going to be the one who ends up winning. Now, you may have to wait until the kid's 30, but eventually. This goes back to going to the bedroom, taking that time out and then coming back to the situation if you can do that. If you're not, especially if you're working by email, right? And you get an email that just sets you off. Don't answer right away. Don't even type it in Outlook or in your email server. Type it, maybe type your response in Word or Notepad or somewhere separate from, then go away and then come back to it. Give yourself a little time to think about it before you respond to a situation, and tone it down perhaps. Sometimes we face problems and there just isn't a solution. And that's a really hard one. It's a hard one for both parties, I think, because there should be a way to solve this problem. And sometimes there isn't. Keep telling yourself you're getting better at this anger management stuff rather than, giving yourself a hard time, because it is a process. Being able to control those thoughts, to control the way you react to situations, but nothing is worth getting angry over. It really isn't. And I've seen a lot of people who just blow up, and I always tend to lose respect for that person. Maybe that's not fair, but I think if you can find a way to get control of the thought, then you can get past. If they want me to get angry, disappoint them. I love that one. And I can't expect people to act the way I want them to, because they come from different situations. They come from different families. They come from different life experiences. I don't have to take this so seriously. Yes, if it's a serious problem, you have to take the problem seriously, but you don't necessarily have to take the whole situation seriously. And this probably was the hardest one for me to get through my head. Sometimes people react and it has absolutely nothing to do with me or the problem at hand. Some years ago, my house was broken into. I was in the house, woke up, found out that computers had been taken, cameras had been taken, all sorts of electronic equipment, including a purse, a couple of purses, and IDs, and wallets, and money, and just about everything. One of the things that was taken was my phone, and I had to go to the AT&T store to see if I could get a replacement. And I ended up blowing up at a customer service person. I mean, I was so mean. And she resolved my problem pretty quickly, got me out of the store, probably the smartest thing she could have done, but got that situation handled. She was very patient. And I got into the car and I sobbed because I'm not that person. I don't react that way. But I had been through so much trauma that morning, finding out that somebody had actually been in the house while I was sleeping, that I took it out on the person in front of me. I took it out on that poor customer service rep who was just trying to help me. It taught me a really important lesson, and that is that I don't know somebody else's situation. I don't know what they've been through. So if they're coming at me and they're angry, maybe I can listen. Maybe I can figure out what's going on and how I can help them. And maybe it's not about me or even about the situation or the problem we're trying to deal with. It was a good lesson for me. So here's my 5-step process, and I'll go through this pretty quickly because we're running out of time and I'd like a little time for any other questions that you may have. Number 1, weigh your interest, figure out how important is this to me? Is this a relationship that I need to keep? Is this somebody who's important to me? Does it have to do with my job? Is it a customer that I have to kind of deal with on a regular basis? Can I appreciate what that other person's going through? Trying to appreciate their viewpoint will help me resolve whatever the issue is. And then using persuasion. And by persuasion, I don't mean being manipulative, but certainly figuring out what's in their best interest and pointing out to them how you can resolve it. Sometimes that's really all you need to do to persuade the other person to calm down and then solve the problem. If it's in your capability to solve it, then solve it, get it resolved. And then find some way after that, after you've solved it, to reset and then restart the relationship. Make sure that the person's satisfied with the solution and then just reset the whole situation, thank them, be done with it, and then move on. And compliment yourself for having done a good job in the heat of the battle. So we covered what you can't change, what you can change, behavioral styles, Maslow, how to avoid your button pushing or recognizing what your buttons are, how to pull up that empathy, and thank you for all those suggestions, preventing and handling problems. We went over some de-stressing techniques, including ones that I hadn't thought of, and then general coping thoughts and a 5-step process. So any questions before we leave this one and you go on to your next session?
Okay, well, Crystal, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us today.
And thank you, Jenny and Amanda, for a wonderful job. I really appreciate you too, also. And thank you all for being here. If you've got any questions, please go ahead and reach out to me.